Tonight, a special presentation of Vote 2024 on NBC3, CNYCentral's NY22 Congressional debate. Just a week from Election Day, Republican incumbent Brandon Williams and his Democratic challenger John Mannion answer your questions.
Congressman Brandon Williams is seeking a second term in the seat. Williams rode a red wave of Republican turnout across New York State in the 2022 midterm elections to beat Francis Canoa by less than 3,000 votes. Born in Texas, he spent his young adult years serving the country in the U.S. Navy, specifically as a nuclear submarine officer. Following his Navy service, he pursued a career in business. Now a once political outsider looking for your vote again.
State Senator John Mannion is looking to take his voice to Washington, D.C. A lifelong Central New Yorker, a longtime educator, elected to the state legislature in 2020. He lives in Geddes and represents western Onondaga County and Oswego County. A primary victory in June earned Mannion the Democratic nomination. Both candidates trying to earn your vote in one of the tightest and most hotly contested congressional races in the country. It's your turn to decide. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Benny. We're coming to you from the campus of Onondaga Community College for this congressional debate.
I'm Matt Mulcahy. Over the next hour, we're going to talk about the issues that are most important to Central New York voters. The candidates are here. They're ready to go. Republican Congressman Brandon Williams joins us tonight, and Democratic State Senator John Mannion, the challenger in this race.
It was a flip of the coin that decided which candidate will get to answer the first question first and which candidate will get the last word at the end of our conversation tonight. Each of the candidates will have 1 minute to respond to the question, and we will get started with question number one. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Let's start with what voters are choosing at the top of the ticket. Why is the candidate of your party the right choice for President of the United States? Senator Mannion, you go first.
Thank you, Matt and Michael, for hosting this very important debate, and I thank you for the question. First of all, I think it's a good point to look at where we are in our country's history right now. We need to look forward. We need a sense of hope, and we need collectiveness and togetherness. And what we've seen over the past several presidential cycles, and certainly this election cycle, is continuing demonization and negativity. We just heard it at a rally just a day or two ago. So we need positivity, we need collectiveness, and we need to move forward. I've always said whenever I've run for office that regardless of who is on the ballot, whether in my party or otherwise, that I'm a Central New Yorker, that I care about this place, that I understand our history, and that I work diligently to serve the people of this area. I also know that we have a great history of individuals that are moderate and that work together, and we have high expectations for the people that represent us to treat each other in a positive and collective way.
Senator Mannion, thank you. Congressman Williams, why is the top of the ticket for the Republican Party the right choice to be President of the United States?
Well, I think people should ask themselves, are they better off today than they were 4 years ago? And of course, when Ronald Reagan asked that question, there was a resounding answer. And I think we're on the cusp of that again today. If you look at the last 4 years, we've endured 4 years almost of an open border and a immigrant crisis unlike any other that even impacts us here in Central New York in terms of violent crime that we've seen, drugs and fentanyl, human trafficking on a scale that is unprecedented. We also have had record inflation, 40-year high of record inflation. You experience it every time you go to the grocery store, every time you fill up your car. These are the direct results of the disastrous policies of the Biden-Harris far-left agenda. And even we even have more wars abroad and threats from our adversaries. We have a weak military. Frankly, we just need better leadership in our country.
Neither of you mentioned the candidate at the top of the ticket by name. I'm wondering, is there a reason for that? Would you like to say something specific about either former President Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris, Mr. Williams?
Well, I think everybody knows who's at the top of the ticket. We don't suffer from lack of name ID. I think, what does it matter to Central New York voters? I think that's really the key issue. And neither of the presidential candidates have made an appearance here in Central New York because, frankly, we are thinking about our future in the direction forward. So we need a Republican in the White House, and I look forward to that victory on November 5th.
Senator Mannion, is there something you'd like to specifically say about the Vice President?
I support Vice President Harris. What we've seen under the current administration is prioritizing Central New York. We have the largest infrastructure project in I-81 in the history of upstate New York, and we have the largest private investment in the history of this country coming to Clay, New York, with CHIPS and Science and the tie-in bill that I was the co-prime sponsor of, green CHIPS legislation in New York. Without it, Micron would be going somewhere else.
Thank you, Senator Mannion. Congressman Williams, you mentioned the economy. We know coming out of COVID that inflation soared, interest rates were high, people worried about recession, but that seems to be in the past. We didn't go into recession. Interest rates have eased. The rate of inflation has leveled off. So how would you characterize the current economy and what needs to change to make that even better?
Sure. The lens I look at the current economy is how it affects the 60+% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. And I know firsthand that these families are tired of hearing that the economy is strong and that prices aren't going up because they're suffering and they're falling further and further behind. And so it might be doing well for Wall Street, but it's not doing great on Main Street, and particularly here in Central New York. That's the reality of the economy. No matter what the pundits say, no matter what the politicians say, the reality is the economy is not helping the people that are living paycheck to paycheck. That is a direct result of the Biden administration policies, from cutting domestic energy production day one, from inviting and opening our border to lots of cheap labor that's depressed wages for working Americans, and the record inflation that has come from reckless spending out of Washington under the 117th Congress and the Biden White House.
Senator Mannion, how would you characterize the current economy and what needs to change to improve it?
So first of all, I feel what people feel out there. My wife and I were teachers for a very long time, and what we have to do is listen to the people and listen to their concerns and then take action. And that's what I did at the state. With rising costs, what we did were a multitude of things. Number one, I was a very strong advocate on making sure that there was property tax relief in 2 of our legislative sessions. Number two, I accelerated the middle class tax cuts to make sure that people kept dollars in their pockets. 3, I was a strong advocate and effectively suspended the gas tax during that time. And what we just saw during this last budget session at the state is something that we have to do more of at the federal level, and I commit to, which is a child tax credit that occurred because of strong negotiation, working with my colleagues in communities similar to Central New York to make sure that we got that done. We also at the federal level have to stop penalizing New Yorkers and get rid of the SALT deduction cap, which I'm committed to doing and would sign on day one to legislation to make sure we get that done.
Thank you, Senator.
We're going to switch to a big topic that has been a topic in Central New York for years now. People who live where we live have, I think, what you might call economic development post-traumatic stress disorder to some degree. Big businesses, big projects that we hear about that sometimes fall flat. Do you believe Micron's promises here, the extent of the build-out and the extent of the potential? Senator Mannion, you first.
Thank you for the question. You know, as I said before, I'm very proud to have supported and been the co-prime sponsor of and helped negotiate the green chips legislation. Without it, Micron would be talking about building in Austin or Albuquerque or somewhere else. So as the chips and science legislation was going through, we worked hard to get that done, and we did. In my conversations with Micron, I know that there's skepticism around major projects because I lived here. I listened to those, and I watched the jobs go away in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate to make sure that this comes to its complete fruition. We are moving forward. Micron assures us, as does the Secretary of Commerce, that this is happening. Too many parties collectively work together to get this done. County Executive Ryan McMahon, Chuck Schumer, Kathy Hochul, Joe Biden, and my colleagues got it done. So when you talk to Micron, what are they doing? Investing in childcare, investing in the STEAM school, Museum of Science Technology, community engagement program. They are working and building and hiring already. We all want a shovel in the ground, and that's imminent.
Congressman Williams, do you believe the promise?
Well, I tell you what, I've spent a lot of time working to accelerate the plans to get construction underway, including numerous meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers for the permitting in my office, pushing them to get the approvals going. Of course, it's caught up in the mire of regulation that not only encompasses New York State, but in our federal bureaucracy, and that's where the holdup has been so far. I do believe that Micron is acting in good faith. I have met with them. I've been out to Idaho, and I think that they are looking for the opportunity to develop here, but we've got to make it easier for them. We've got to streamline the process, which is what I've been working on nonstop for 2 years. I, of course, come from the tech industry and understand the dynamics of the tech industry, and so getting this done is no small thing. And I'm anxious for them to turn the first shovelful of dirt, but it looks like that is still a year away, and I will be critical to making sure that that is followed through in a second term.
Congressman Williams, a quick follow-up on Micron, and maybe this will open that window too. A few days ago, former President Trump said he doesn't like the CHIPS Act, and he'd like to replace it with giant tariffs, that would solve all the problem of not having enough semiconductors made in this country. Do you agree with that premise? Are you concerned that the CHIPS Act might go away if former President Trump is elected? And do you support this idea of tariffs as a solution?
Well, the best solution to ensuring the continuity of the CHIPS Act legislation is having a Republican here advocating for it, with a majority in the House, with a majority in the Senate, and with a Republican in the White House. So far and away, the most important thing that we can do is have a Republican at the table telling Republicans what a important project this is and how critical it is for the long-term viability politically of this seat, but particularly of the economic viability of our region.
But tariffs, are you in favor of his plan for tariffs?
In general, I think tariffs are a good tool to level the playing field with foreign manufacturers. My opponent talks about the hollowing out of manufacturing here, which of course is true, but that was brought on by a lot of policies like NAFTA and others where the tariffs were removed and the jobs left. So I think it's an important part of rebuilding manufacturing in America, and particularly here in Central New York.
Senator Mannion, the same topic to you. Do you support this idea of tariffs, and are you concerned about the future of the CHIPS Act if former President Trump was elected?
So I'll just say that, in a bipartisan way, at all levels of government, entities work together to make sure we got this done because we care about Central New York. While I was working to make that happen, my opponent called this corporate welfare. In fact, he went out of his way to write a letter to the editor to do it. And now we have the former president aligning himself with the same type of philosophy here as it comes to making sure that this project comes to fruition. This is good for Central New York. This is necessary for Central New York. A lot of people have put a lot of effort behind it to make it happen, and Micron is committed to doing it. What is, of particular concern is that the greatest risk to this would be a presidency that has someone who does not believe that this should have ever happened. And from a national security standpoint, we need to onshore semiconductor chip manufacturing, and that's why I'm proud that it's going to happen right here in Clay, New York.
I appreciate transitioning to national security, in fact, global affairs. This, Congressman Williams, is your question first. If the president were to call you for advice on the best approach for supporting Israel and resolving violence and tension in the Middle East post-October 7th terror attack, what would you tell her or him?
Well, I think the most important thing is to signal our strong support for Israel and that it doesn't waver, it doesn't go back and forth as has happened repeatedly under the Biden administration. We need to be a partner both in terms of military support as well as financial support. We also need to be an advocate with the other players and actors in the region to stand up against the hegemony of Iran, and that is primarily through the Abrams Accords, which was a singular success and accomplishment of the Trump administration previously and needs to be expanded. In fact, that is precisely what was going on when Hamas launched their attacks. They were afraid that Israel was making the strong partnerships to bring peace to that region, which of course would undermine Iran. And so I believe that under a Trump administration, there actually will be renewed expansion and calls for the Abrams Accords, which is really the foundation of peace in the region. So I'm very optimistic.
Senator Mannion, how would you advise the president on the issue of Israel in the Middle East?
First of all, Israel is our ally, and we must continue to support them. They are the only democracy in the Middle East. And what we watched on October 7th was horrific. What we want, what the people of Israel want, what the people of Gaza and Palestine and Lebanon want is sustained peace. So we as a world power must work together towards a two-state solution and use partners that are regional and otherwise to help broker that agreement and have truly sustained peace. The hostages must be released. We must return to a peaceful situation here, and the United States must do what they did in the past, which is play a role in that. One concerning thing about October 7th that some may forget is that there was no Speaker of the House, an unprecedented act here in this country. The removal of a speaker midterm left us unable to respond with the speed necessary to provide appropriations to support our ally.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, clearly,
Go ahead, Congressman.
just to add to that, it's clear that the Biden administration has gone back and forth on supporting Israel in very material ways. And so, I think we have to recognize that when you talk about that Gazans and the Palestinians want peace, these are the people that launched an attack against Israel in the most brutal sense, and then expanded it to Hezbollah, and the same group of people coming in, the same ideology, trying to destroy Israel and chant from the river to the sea. My opponent is backed by the Working Families Party that actually is pro-Hamas, and he sought that endorsement and to get on that ballot line after October 7th. Which makes no sense to stand here and one side of your mouth say that you support Israel, and on the other hand, go cultivate a relationship with pro-Hamas advocates here in the United States that also stood up to put up the anti-Semitic riots and encampments that happen across our country.
Senator Mannion,
so
would like to reply to
very
that?
disingenuous.
I'm a strong supporter of Israel. I have been all along, and to distort that record is unfair, honestly. And I will say that we have to continue to support our ally. We have to continue to support our ally Israel and strongly support them as we move forward. I will not break from that commitment to the state of Israel, the people of Israel. In my district, we have the Safe Haven Museum at Fort Ontario in Oswego, which is a reminder of the atrocities that occurred during the Holocaust. So we will stand with our allies, and I'm unsure where the current administration has wavered with their support of Israel.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you both. We're turning to a topic that really is a crisis in the classroom across central New York and beyond. Megan Coleman is here with that.
Gentlemen, good afternoon to you. This is a topic that is very near and dear to the hearts of many families in central New York and certainly school districts as well. 1 in 3 children here in New York is considered chronically absent from school. That is 18 days a year that children are missing out on that learning time. Should there be a federal incentive tied to creating a system to get kids back in the classroom? Senator Mannion, we'll begin with you.
Well, I spent 30 years almost in a classroom, and I know the importance of making sure that our students are there and learning. And I have worked hard to make sure that our schools have the funding that's necessary, universal pre-K, universal school meals, to make sure our kids are there, they're fed, and they have every resource necessary to be as successful as possible. I do support that. Attendance is important. And, as our school districts have been tasked to do so much more over the course of this past generation, I think that it does require a greater commitment by districts, and they need that support to make sure that these kids are coming to school. As a teacher, I know the challenges when it comes to absenteeism, and I certainly worked with those kids and their families to make sure that they could overcome whatever challenge there might have been, be it illness, a family illness, or otherwise. But we need these kids in school. We need them in school. It's good for them, and it's good for, of course, their education and their career pathways. We don't need them falling behind, so I support making sure that school districts have every resource to be able to move forward to get these kids in the school.
Congressman Williams, should there be a federal incentive tied to getting kids back in the classroom to deal with this issue of chronic absenteeism?
Well, chronic absenteeism is, in fact, a problem, particularly in the wake of COVID and the incredible losses of learning that occurred during COVID. And we all know that masking children didn't solve any problems. Having remote learning only exacerbated the problems, and we still have never recovered from the terrible leadership here in New York State during COVID, which of course included my opponent's term in the Senate. If you watch when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California, she actually implemented a plan to arrest parents of absentee children and put them in jail. And her motivation, which she says, is so that it would put pressure on parents to get children in school so that the schools would get the federal funding, the $1.4 billion in federal funding that was lost because of absenteeism. That's really what's at stake here. And to me, it's tragic. There are tragic stories of parents being prosecuted in a very reckless manner and harming particularly low-income parents. It is incredible that Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party actually is not fessed up to this.
Gentlemen, thank you.
A story we've reported on a lot lately has to do with Excellus, Blue Cross Blue Shield, negotiating with multiple healthcare providers and the customer and the patient being left in the middle. Our Carter White's done a lot of that reporting. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Each day, thousands of Central New Yorkers are battling anxiety, wondering if they'll still have access to their doctor in the new year. Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield is still at odds with both Family Care Medical Group and the company that operates St. Joseph's Health Hospital in Syracuse. Patients are forced to either wait and hope or take action and make difficult decisions like finding a new doctor or a new insurer, all because of arguments over reimbursement rates. Both of the candidates looking to represent those patients in NY22 say that they've been in contact with the companies involved, but what will actually move the needle here? What can be done at the federal level to put guardrails on the private insurance industry to make sure this kind of anxiety doesn't come around every few years?
Congressman Williams, what can be done to better protect the consumer in this battle?
Well, this is a very difficult situation. It affects thousands of patients, thousands of our neighbors here, particularly that get treatment at St. Joe's. In fact, just last week, I attended the St. Joe's Legislative Council. All of the local elected leaders were there, except for my opponent, John Mannion. I don't know why he couldn't attend at this critical time to be a part of the conversation at St. Joe's and to hear their concerns to get this resolved. In fact, tomorrow I'm hosting a healthcare roundtable in my office. I've invited Congressman Greg Murphy, who is a medical doctor, member of Congress, to come and help facilitate this conversation so that we can have everything out on the table to get this resolved. There really isn't time to wait. Just last year, I had a major medical procedure at St. Joe's. I know how important it is to keep those services here in Central New York, and I'm using the power of my office to make that happen. I wish my opponent would step up.
Congressman Williams, we're glad you're feeling well this year. Appreciate that. What can be done to protect patients and customers, Senator Mannion?
So first of all, I feel for the people. I feel for the patients that are out there. I'm empathetic to their concerns. If somebody is in the middle of treatment, a pregnancy or cancer treatment, and they would have to change providers or change their doctor, that's completely unacceptable. The uncertainty is certainly stressful for these individuals. So we've taken action. I've been engaged on the phones and written letters to both entities encouraging them to come together, come to a resolution quickly, so that this anxiety can go away, and just as importantly, people are receiving the health care services that they deserve, that there has been a commitment to them to make. So that's one. Number two, I've called upon DFS at the state to see if there's anything that can be done to make sure that we move forward in the process as we go through arbitration. And finally, in the long-term situation, both at the state and the federal level, we need legislation to make sure that when parties are in negotiations or in the arbitration process, that patients, consumers are protected so that they can continue to receive the health care that honestly is owed to them.
Thank you, Senator Mannion. Moving on, for decades in our country, the issue of abortion was settled law, a super precedent set in 1973 with Roe v. Wade that established the right to abortion before viability. Now that the Supreme Court has sent this issue back to the states, should Congress take on the issue directly and pass a law restoring the right to abortion under the parameters set by Roe versus Wade? Senator Mannion first.
The answer is yes. The women of this country deserve to have the protections necessary when it comes to reproductive health. I've been supported by Planned Parenthood in every single one of my elections, and I have a 100% scorecard from them. I'm the only candidate in this race that can be trusted to protect a woman's right to choose. In the state, prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we protected a woman's right to choose and their providers, and have only strengthened those laws after it being overturned, making sure that people have access to in vitro fertilization. They have access to contraception. They have access to abortive medications, including physicians being able to send that out of the state. So these decisions should be being made between a woman and her health care provider, not by legislators. I would sign on to the Women's Health Protection Act when I'm elected to office.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman Williams, same question.
Well, my opponent has spent millions and millions of dollars lying to Central New York voters about my position, about my record. I will state it here for the umpteenth time. I am pro-life by faith. There, of course, should be exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother, and I will not vote for a national abortion ban. I've been consistent on this for the 2 years, and my opponent has spent millions of dollars lying to you about this. The truth is, abortion's been legal in New York State since 1974, and the courts just affirmed that. They just affirmed that that is a right that will continue in New York State. It's the citizens of New York that are going to determine the future and availability of abortion in New York. My opponent should have stayed in the state Senate if he's so concerned about this issue, because that's where that decision will be made. It won't be made in Congress. It will not be made at the federal level.
Thank you, Congressman Williams.
Gentlemen, voters have been seeing a lot of both of you on television and online lately. Can you tell me about one of the ads that's out there that's running about you that includes something that ticks you off, that gets under your skin? Congressman, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the most important thing is that when I go out on a date with my wife of 32 years, that we try not to pick a sports bar where there's a lot of TV showing. But I tell you what really infuriates me. I started my career as a military officer. In fact, I was in charge of some of, if not the most delicate secrets, the most important secrets, the most powerful weapons that our nation actually has, the biggest responsibilities that we have, and it's a position of incredible integrity. And I served in that role for many years successfully. And so to see the lies that get poured out, particularly as we just discussed about my stance on abortion, I will say it one more time. I am pro-life by faith. There should be exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother, and there will not be a federal abortion ban. I will not vote for a federal abortion ban. And that is exactly the opposite of what my opponent is lying to women in Central New York about. And I just find it shocking and infuriating.
Senator Mannion, tell me about an ad that ticks you off.
So I come from a family of individuals in law enforcement, and I have many friends in law enforcement, both active and retired. I've always stood up for law enforcement, and am committed to making sure that we give them every resource necessary to keep our communities safe. My opponent has tried to paint me as something that I am not. I have supported law enforcement, and they have supported me in every single one of my elections, including this one, because they know that I'm going to stand with them. I've delivered as well. It was my legislation that created the first police force in New York State in 50 years at the Syracuse Regional Airport Authority. I've supported law enforcement groups with funding for training, funding for mental health, and funding for technology to make sure that they have what they need to keep our communities safe.
Gentlemen, thank you. Our Vote 2024 congressional debate continues in just a moment here on CNY Central. From stressed out parents to impeachment, immigration, and more, the conversation will continue right after this. And hello once again, everyone. I'm Michael Benny. We're coming to you from the campus of OCC for our debate in the race for Congress.
I'm Matt Mulcahy. It's going very well so far. We're taking all the issues that are important to our Central New York voters. Candidates are here. We'll reintroduce them. Republican Congressman Brandon Williams, Democratic State Senator John Mannion. We want to start this section off here with a personal question for you. Senator Mannion, you'll take this one first. When was the last time you had a homeowner crisis in your house? An appliance maybe that stopped working, a clogged drain, a light bulb that needed changing. How'd you fix the problem, and what did you learn from the experience?
So, unfortunately, we did have a plumbing issue not so long ago in our home where our basement had flooded. And it was no fault of the systems that were in place. It was the fault of someone who had visited as a guest. So I'm very fortunate that we have...
Do you want to name names in that story?
I do not.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no, thank you. No,
But
I
go
still
ahead.
have that person's vote, I believe.
So how did it go from there?
Anyway, I've got a fantastic plumber, and fortunately a backup plumber, and that person came over, took care of the situation. After they left, we cleaned everything up, and it went very well. But it does give me the opportunity to speak to how we need to continue to support the trades, and we support manufacturing. I've done that with almost over doubling an apprenticeship program for the Manufacturers Alliance of Central New York. And I've watched even in our public schools as the stigma of going into the trades has gone away just over in the past few years. It's a rewarding career. We need to support it, and certainly with expected growth in the region, we need to make sure that there are pathways to rewarding careers in a multitude of different fashions.
Congressman Williams, any home emergencies? What did you learn from the experience?
Well, home emergencies, we live on a farm, and so this happens on a regular basis. You know, about 12 or 13 years ago, I built raised beds for my wife, Stephanie, in our garden. We actually pull a lot of farm-to-table produce from there, and it's a big part of our diet through the summer. Unfortunately, those started to decay some years ago, and I promised to replace them. That only took 3 years to get started. So I've watched these decay in our backyard. But, you know, there's nothing like the urgency and being busy to get to get this kicked off. So I actually rebuilt all of these raised beds using black locust. I think they're going to last another 20 plus years because it's an excellent wood, and sourcing it from local lumber mills and local suppliers. In fact, the trees came just from a few miles from our home. So very proud to have accomplished that, and I got a few bonus points.
Yeah, you did. Back at home. Yes, sure you did. Thank you.
Don't you love learning things?
Yeah,
learning things about
I've
them
learned as much
personally.
right there than I had all night
I think
long.
that's it right there. Let's move on, gentlemen. There is an alarming advisory from the Surgeon General that came out over the summer. This was a troubling report. It found 41% of this country's 63 million parents of children younger than 18 felt, and this is a direct quote, so stressed out they cannot function. And another 48% said that the stress was completely overwhelming that they felt. Some of these people live here in Central New York. Many of them do, in fact. How can you help? Senator Mannion.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, when I taught for 30 years, I taught before cell phones, and I taught after cell phones, and I think we would all agree, and we're seeing a change that's long overdue, is that we're getting those phones out of these kids' hands. They cause an incredible amount of stress. When it happened, I said, we are undergoing the largest experiment in the history of humans, which is we're taking 10 and 11-year-olds and we're giving them the world in their hands. And what we have done at the state level, and I would support it at the national level, and there is legislation out there, is to push back against big tech that are using these algorithms that are impacting our kids. I taught about neurotransmitters and synapse. I taught about the human brain. So I know and watched firsthand in the classroom the negative impact that these algorithms can have that show more and more extreme events and feed into, really these challenges that kids have. So we got to get the phones out of the kids' hands in the schools. We're doing that. And I also support our schools with funding to make sure we have school counselors and social workers to do their job and help these families.
Thank you, Senator Mannion. Congressman Williams, what can we do about parents who feel so stressed they are unable to function?
Well, obviously I grew up in a different era when kids could be kids, when you'd go out in the neighborhood and have pickup games of sports or all kinds of games that we played. In fact, our parents had to come find us in the evening to come home for dinner. Today, our neighborhoods are not safe. There's a number of issues around this, including cashless bail and raise the age, that parents don't feel comfortable with their kids just going out and having an unstructured day, an unstructured time. And it's a shame that our communities are not what they once were. I agree that the social media had a very negative effect. And it is true that the algorithms, for example, with TikTok are creating a lot of this social anxiety. My wife, Stephanie, actually mentored a number of young women in our church for many years. And we saw this. These were incredibly talented, capable people that still were ending up in mental health crises, one after the other, because of the environment that's been created by technology, but also kids just can't be kids anymore. It is too competitive. Let them grow up. They'll be okay.
Thank you both.
Next question. The power of impeachment. It rests in the hands of Congress. The House impeached President Trump twice. The current Congress impeached Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and authorized an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Is the power of impeachment being used properly? Senator Mannion first.
Thank you for the question. So I'd like to go back to what occurred on January 6th and the opportunity that Congress had to act appropriately. If we recall, prior to the election and after, also prior to the 2016 election and afterwards, the former president was sowing doubt in our election systems, which continues today and is the greatest threat to democracy. So following January 6th, an insurrection on our Capitol, individuals calling for the assassination of our vice president, the assemblage of fake electors to the Electoral College, and the pressuring of the Secretary of State in Georgia to find 11,000 votes. These actions are unbelievable, and if you were to go back 10 years, none of us would have believed that this happened in the United States. So that impeachment process, including a vote from Representative Katko, moved us forward towards the appropriate trial. That trial did not end. It was basically fell along political lines, and as a result, here's where we are in 2024.
Congressman Williams, is the power of impeachment being used properly?
It's funny that my opponent, he's got one set of values that he uses for Democrats and another for Republicans. I have taken every opportunity to avoid things like the motion to vacate and to avoid disruptions and to putting politics above everything. It's funny that you would bring up assassinations. There's been two that have been attempted on President Trump just in the last few months due to the incompetence of the Secret Service. And so these are the times that have been created by the Biden-Harris administration. When you talk about an impeachment in the final days of a presidency for which there's an orderly transition that's going to take place 2 weeks later, that seems like politics over anything else. And I'm just sick of it. I think the American people are sick of it. They want us to govern. And govern means leadership, not all this performative politics. And it happens on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you, Congressman.
Let's turn to a topic that's fueling a mental health crisis all over the country. Megan Coleman is here with that.
And gentlemen, you both just spoke about social media a moment ago. There have been efforts both on the state and federal level to prevent the harmful effects of social media on children. In fact, the U.S. Surgeon General has called for warning labels on these platforms. Both of you are fathers. Do you believe social media companies bear responsibility for the mental health crisis we have very well documented among children? And would you support slapping these tobacco-style warnings on social media outlets? We will start with Congressman Williams.
Well, I'm not sure the warnings are going to deter kids from, the incredibly addictive behavior and tendencies of these devices. We have actually had investigations led by Republicans into TikTok and others. starting to unravel what is actually happening and why these are having such a detrimental effect on our youth. Just the whole mental health crisis that's been forced onto law enforcement. You see that law enforcement now is the front line in dealing with mental health, which is frankly very hard on law enforcement. We have closed institutions to deal with it. We are over-medicating our children. There's things that we should be doing in our schools, like bringing back music and PE and other activities that actually reduce anxiety and give kids other outlets instead of the path that we're on.
Senator Mannion, do you believe that social media companies are responsible for in any form of the mental health crisis facing our children, and do you support these warning labels?
They absolutely are responsible, and I would support warnings. In fact, I took action in the state in supporting the SAVE Act, which holds these tech companies accountable and still preserves adults and also their ability to monitor their kids on social media in a better way. But what it does is it rejects these algorithms that are absolutely predatory. It's part of their business model. It affects all of us, including adults. And if it's affecting us, it's certainly affecting our children. So we've learned a lot over the past few years. I spoke with a parent who lost their child due to suicide as a result of these awful predatory algorithmic messages that bombarded their social media feed. It is a tragic story that happened in just a few hours, and that's why it made it easy for me. And I was proud to support legislation at the state level, and I will do the same with the legislation that is currently sitting on desks in Congress.
Gentlemen, thank you.
The I-Team's Mary Keeler joins us now with a question for both candidates on a lesser-known and legal policy Medicaid recipients might not actually know about.
Our I-Team is investigating why Medicaid, a health care insurance program for the poor, requires states like New York to go after assets of patients who die. We introduced you to Ellen McCauley, whose mother relied on Medicaid to survive before finally passing in 2023. One of the only family possessions left behind was the Syracuse home her mother owned and lived in for decades. The Medicaid program then placed a lien on her house, totaling more than $200,000 in the name of recovering costs of her care when she was alive. The house is barely worth $60,000. The result now is a poor woman has died. Her family has nothing to inherit. There's now a vacant home in the city nobody can live in, and very little, if anything, is recovered by the Medicaid program. Our question continues to be, who wins here?
Senator Mannion, we'll ask that again. Who wins in this process?
Well, I'll tell you, no one wins here. No one wins. This is awful to hear this story and how this is so impactful on these families. You know, in this country, we have created programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to make sure that we're supporting each other. And we're all paying into these programs. And as a result, we should benefit from those programs as we are participants in it. So this is going to require legislation to make sure that something like this does not happen again. And I, as a current representative, have worked with constituents through challenging cases like this. I have a tremendous team that makes sure that they're attentive and responsive to individuals that are facing a crisis like this. And I encourage this family and others to reach out to my office. When you have a situation like this, I say to my staff, people are coming to us because they don't know where else to go. And I thank CNYCentral for covering this story, and our team will work to try to find a solution and then a long-term solution legislatively.
Congressman Williams.
Well, as was mentioned in the story, Medicaid is administered by the states, and of course that comes out of Albany. And so with a Democratic supermajority in the Assembly and the Senate, why hasn't this been addressed? You know, why are we still hearing about these tragic cases? And why hasn't Senator Mannion already addressed this? Doing it, after, on a case-by-case basis doesn't seem like leadership to me. Since being in Congress, I have championed transparency in pricing laws so that there are no surprise bills, so that you can anticipate and know the cost before your treatment. And I think that is critical to avoiding these kinds of circumstances, as well as legislation for no surprise bills. Because that, too, is catching families off guard, like in the case that's described. You know, the New York State has to do a better job in how it administers these kinds of programs. With a supermajority in Albany, there's only one party to blame for that. And there's only one party that you can point to that has failed to live up to protect families in instances like this.
Senator Mannion, quick response.
Well, my opponent has voted to cut funding to Social Security Administration twice in their administrative actions. You can look it up. It's online, and if anyone would like the information, we could share. When it comes to Medicare and Medicaid, I think we all know that these are federal programs, and we should all be working together to find solutions for each other, not name-calling, not picking apart one party, but working together to find a solution. And certainly my office has a great history of that. We've advanced legislative measures when we've seen problems, and I will continue to do so when I'm in Washington.
Congressman Williams, quick response to that.
Sure. Yeah. I've actually crossed the aisle to support the Social Security Fairness Act, which oddly enough, the New York State teachers unions actually like and appreciate my standing up to restore Social Security benefits to retired teachers, law enforcement officials, and firefighters. So just another example of, frankly, lies coming out of my opponent, which don't serve, frankly, the public dialogue.
Thank you. Next question. Congressman Williams, this will be yours first. What obligation does Congress have to pass comprehensive immigration reform that sets our nation on the right course in managing the intense pressure from migrants at our southern border?
Well, immigration reform starts with a secure border, and Congress did pass a secure border bill, H.R. 2, and it has sat on Chuck Schumer's desk for about 18 months. So there has been plenty of options to take that up, to have a negotiation. But once again, it is politics over people. And that has been the policy of the other side. So if you look at H.R. 2, we did step up to reinstate Remain in Mexico. Let's remember that border security is national security. We've got to stop the human trafficking, stop the drug trafficking. 300,000 children, unaccompanied children, have been brought across by the drug cartels and are now in the sex trade in the United States under the Biden-Harris administration. And that is a shame. And so if they had implemented H.R. 2 a year and a half ago, there are perhaps more than 100,000 children that would not be in the sex trade today. But that is what happens when you put politics over party. And the fact is that we did step up and the other side didn't.
Senator Mannion, immigration.
We absolutely need comprehensive immigration reform, and we've needed it, honestly, for over a generation. It takes people with political will who are willing to work with both sides to get this together, to find a resolution so that we have a functioning and humane immigration system. There was a piece of legislation that was going to come out of the Senate that was negotiated in a bipartisan way and was moving. This is how we develop legislation, and making sure that all voices are heard, that it's comprehensive and moving forward to fix our broken system. But at the direction of former President Trump, he spoke to individuals like the Congressman and others to say, don't let that bill advance, and don't let it advance purely for political reasons so that the Biden administration would not have a win. We had an opportunity to increase our number of Border Patrol agents. This was endorsed by the Border Patrol Union. It was going to fix a broken asylum seeker process where people have found a way around that system. Increase funding for technology, increase funding for our courts. Let's get this done and work together and really solve a problem. The legislation that my opponent is referring to had zero chance, was never going anywhere because it was not negotiated.
Congressman, you did want to speak. I do want to give you an opportunity. Your opponent did say that former President Trump reached out to you and spoke to you. Did he speak to you about the comprehensive immigration?
I've never spoken to Donald Trump. Certainly not on immigration. He doesn't, I don't call him and ask for advice on immigration. I make my own decisions. But I can tell you that this phantom bill that he's talking about never got voted on. It couldn't even get Democrat votes in the Senate. And I don't think Donald Trump's calling Democrat senators and telling them what to do. If that is, that's a real newsworthy event. Can you see the lies about how my opponent represents these things, believing that they won't get challenged? And it's just simply not true. I can point to H.R. 2 that was sent to the Senate, and that begins a process of being voted on in the Senate, changed in the Senate, and sent back to the House. That's how it works. But Chuck Schumer wouldn't do that because he didn't want a solution, because he likes having an open border. My opponent, who's backed by the working family parties, supports open borders. In fact, that's why he went out and got the Working Families Party endorsement, is on their ballot line. They support open borders, and in fact, he even supported free health care for illegal immigrants. Just don't let him talk out of both sides of his mouth. It is a disservice to the public.
Senator Mannion.
There's no such thing as free health care or free health care for undocumented individuals. There's no program.
Wow, you were the champion of it. Even Kathy Hochul said that you couldn't do it.
We'll leave that there, gentlemen. Let's go back to the top of the ticket before we have your closing statements. If, and this is to the Congressman first, if former President Trump does not win the election and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, does, will we be okay?
Yes, we'll be okay. We have 250 years of history. We have a robust system, and there have been popular and unpopular presidents in the past. Either person wins, our nation is going to be strong.
Senator Mannion, will we be okay?
Well, we need strong leadership in Washington that is willing to call out anyone, including members of our own party, when something as atrocious and egregious as a threat to our democracy occurs. So I am working hard to make sure that I expose and push back against the toxic rhetoric that is continuing to sow doubt in our election systems. It's very dangerous, and the former president has done so. We watched what occurred prior to January 6th, and we watch what occurred afterwards. So we are going to need strong leaders and leaders on both sides of the aisle to push back and reject if we are trying to overthrow a government, if there is another insurrection, if there are threats on elected officials' lives or members of boards of elections that are out there doing the work upholding democracy. So I stand strong in making sure that I lend my voice into the support of our elections officials, our elected officials, and I hope and believe that we will move forward in a positive way, in a non-toxic way, in a collective way, as our democracy depends on it, and our democracy is our kids and our grandkids.
Thank you, Senator Mannion. Time now for those closing statements. We begin with Congressman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this today. You know, 2 years I stood up and disrupted the system because I'm a political outsider. And I challenged the system by being plain-spoken and direct. And I continue to that. Politicians don't like me because of that. I actually have the technical, military, and business experience to expose their lies and to uncover their false promises that they make. I have stood up to Republicans to bring affordable internet to our district, and I have stood up to strengthen Social Security by crossing the aisle. I've also called out Democrats for their reckless cashless bail policies, as well as the dangers of an open border that we've talked about today. The truth is, and everybody knows, our country is on the wrong track, and politicians actually are to blame. My opponent is part of the system that lies to your face while self-dealing in the background, and that has got to end. I love Central New York. I am here to fight for you, to stand up for you in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Senator Mannion.
Matt, Michael, and Megan, thank you all for being a part of our lives here in Central New York, being a part of my life, in the legacy of Laura Hand, in the legacy of Ron Curtis. I was a challenge bowler. I wore a light blue shirt and proudly won that day. And I lived through the days of Salty Sam, and my wife was on Saturday Showboat. This is Central New York. We care about each other. We lift each other up. I've lived here my entire life, and I know the challenges that we face, but also the goodness, the heartiness, the humor that Central New Yorkers have to persevere. That's why I never stop working. I never stop working to make sure that I deliver on things like protecting a woman's right to choose, like making sure our public schools have everything they need so that our kids can be whatever they want to be. And as I watched the loss of jobs in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I was a very strong voice in bringing Micron here. We have to work together. We must dismiss the gloom and doom. This is Central New York. We expect our leaders to be non-toxic and deliver, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you both. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this conversation. We appreciate you very much for taking part. And thank all of you for watching our Vote 2024 congressional debate from here on the campus of OCC.
For Michael Benny, I'm Matt Mulcahy. Remember, early voting is already underway on Election Day on Tuesday, November 5th. For all the information you may need at any time, go to CNYCentral.com. Thanks to both the Congressman and the Senator for performing so well tonight. Have a great night. We'll see you later on.